and welcome for those joining us for the first time today. So actually today is the third session of this workshop and the last one. When we'll start, Ben will recap a bit what was covered in the first and second session for those of you joining us for the first time, but also as a refresher for those who have already joined us. But before that, of course, I will introduce myself. So my name is Alexandra Atalla, and I'm working with UNDP's Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems community known as the FACS community. Today, as usual, before going into the content, we will have a very quick Mentimeter. And I see more colleagues introducing themselves in the chat box. So hello, I see, yes, we have several colleagues joining from Indonesia. That's great to see you. Alejandra, my colleague, will share the instructions for the Menti in the chat box while I share my screen. So you can join either by scanning the QR code or you can do it in a traditional way, going to the website and typing the code that you see on the screen and in the chat box. Or you can use directly the link in the chat box and do it in a website version if that's easier for you. And I see already 8 colleagues have joined us. So yes, 10, perfect. So there will be 2 questions. So let's go to the first question. What state are you? So for those who have joined us for the first 2 modules, we were talking about internal states. Don't worry if you haven't joined us and you don't know what we are talking about. Just, respond whatever, you feel. So what state are you at now? And the question is state in the states of internal state. So more, maybe Ben, you can jump in, not which country you're joining us from.
The question should be, what state are you in? Meaning what internal state are you? Right? It doesn't, the question, if you weren't in the previous, if you're in the last week, you would understand what we meant. But no worries, I'm glad there's everybody from Indonesia here.
Yes.
So lovely answer as well. But maybe this question won't work very well, but never mind.
Yes. So we'll take that into account for our cohort tomorrow. But yes, we have some questions, some answers, excited and energized, mixed feelings. Yeah, tranquilo. Curious and feeling good. Okay, perfect. So maybe let's jump into anticipative, hopeful. Great. So let's move to the second question. What is one big thing that you would still want to achieve personally or professionally? So in module 1, we've asked this question as well, in terms of where would you like to see some innovation in either your personal or professional life? In what areas? So we've asked that question. So as we are today in our last session, we're kind of asking that question again. More confidence to give positive impact. better critical thinking, realize my full potential, make communities and livelihoods better, increase my innovation, maybe one more answer and we can close. Peace at all times, more adventurous, happy, and blessed, to be more advancing in research. Wow, so we have like a variety of different answers and different areas. Thank you all for yes, sharing your inputs with us. I'll stop the Mentimeter right now, but you can feel free to add more things if more things come into your mind. And with this, I'll hand over to Ben. So, for those of you joining for the first time, also an intro. Ben is the founder of the Brain Innovation Project and has worked with UNDP and the food systems team for a couple of years now, offering various workshops related to innovation, agility, resilience, which are based on neuroscience and on neuroscience approaches. As already mentioned in the previous two sessions, Ben will be offering as well one-on-one coaching sessions. Some of you have already signed up through the sign-up form, but if you would be interested, Alejandra as well, my colleague, who will put the link in the chat box. And with this, over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Alexandra, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Delighted to be with you. And it's great that there's both new people who haven't been participating in the last 2 weeks, and also some people who have. It's always difficult for people to get to divide the time for 3 weeks in a row. But obviously, people who are new, there's stuff which we've worked on for the last 2 weeks. So inevitably there's going to be some gaps, but that's just the way things are. One request: if you are able to turn on your cameras, it would be wonderful. I understand that some of you have internet connections or issues. Maybe you have to do something else at the same time, or you're listening in your pajamas. I don't know. But if you are able to turn on your cameras, it just makes the whole thing that we actually know that there are living, breathing human beings behind, here, because this is what it's all about: living, breathing human beings who innovate. Um, with that, let me just go a little. Let's just go where we're going today. Just to recap, on module one, we talked a bit about the framework, the AAA plus framework, a bit about the lens, and it was a bit of an introduction to it. And we're going to go into this in more detail later on today. Yesterday, oh, it seems like yesterday. Last week, we talked about this part, the internal state, right? And we spent the whole 2 hours on internal state. And so, if that was the first question, it was about basically internal state. And today we're talking about using the AA plus framework. How does it actually, how can we use it? And we're going to be going into a little bit more detail as to what it is. And we're going to be starting off as a recap on modules 1 and 2. And I think this is important both for people who are joining for the first time, but also we covered a lot, right, in these two sessions. So it's also useful to go through it again, not just at a high summary level, but to spend 10-15 minutes really sort of like going through it, because I think the context to the framework is critical. Right? It only makes sense really within its context. And then we're going to be moving on to how we can use the framework individually for ourselves to make sense of our own challenges and innovation potentials. And then we will be moving towards how we can actually use it in our work, maybe with communities or government officials or whatever. And for these two things, I'm going to be asking for examples from you that we can actually work with. Okay, but we'll come to that later on. And just one more thing, as I always say, I get excited about this stuff. I talk quickly sometimes. Um, jump in if there's any questions or comments. Yeah, don't. This isn't formal. We can if stuff doesn't make sense as we go along, jump in. And if we're going to get to it later, I will say. But please just jump in, ask any questions, or make any comments as we go along. With that, any questions or comments? Nope. Okay. And also, I can't really see the chat so much. So if there are any things which come up, please just draw my attention to them. So I'm going to start off with a recap on modules 1 or 2. And this is going to take about 20 minutes, I guess, maybe a little bit less, but let's see. Hopefully this is useful for people who are joining for the first time, but also a refresher for people who were there, because it was 2 weeks ago, and quite a lot happens in 2 weeks. All right. So recap. Remember, this is all when Alexandra said that I talk about neuroscience. When we talk about neuroscience, it's based in life processes. Right? Like neuroscience can sound quite abstract, but in a sense, it's a natural view of trying to understand how the brain and the nervous system and how that all relates to us more generally, how this works. And this is located in us as biological living organisms. And this is what life does, right? Whether it's single-celled organisms or palm trees, it pursues its biological goals. And it does this through two ways. It needs to maintain its internal environment, its health, right? It needs to survive internally, otherwise then it's dead, right? And it also needs to act on the external world to get resources and escape threats, right? Whether you're a palm tree or a beetle, you have to maintain your internal functioning and be able to escape threats and get resources. So this is what life does as a general thing at all levels. So in other words, you've got agents which adapt, or agents which has aspirations, and they adapt to their environment to do this, right? And they adapt, meaning they learn new behaviors, but also through evolution they adapt their anatomy, right? And they learn to live in new environments, etc. This is a basic process. Then humans come along and kind of mess the whole system up in many ways, right? We don't just have the biological goals, but we sort of, it's complex, but we layer on cognitive goals onto these more basic biological goals of survival and reproduction. But we're still agents which are adapting and aspiring and aspiring. Right? So we still have to act on our external environment and maintain our internal environment. And if some of you are wondering what this has got to do with the framework, I'm just trying to locate the framework in our underlying biology. It's not just an academic theoretical approach. But So here we've layered on these cognitive goals, but we still are working with our biology and our basic processes. So, for example, you're cold. One of the basic processes in nature is something called homeostasis, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. The idea that we have to keep our bodies within certain ranges. So my temperature can't drop below this and can't go above this, blood pressure, etc., right? Sugar level. So where our bodies are continuously trying to keep us within viable points. And within nature, if you're cold, sorry, that's the other way. Sorry, it shouldn't be. Yeah, it's right. To get cold, to get colder, right? I mean, if you're hot, to get colder, you can sweat in nature or jump into water, like hippopotamuses. They jump into water. But we can do all of this, but we can also install air conditioning, right? But it's still based around these same processes. Um, Exhaustion. In nature, we can sleep, but as with our cognition and planning, we can also develop no screens after 10 p.m., etc. Relationships, grooming. That you see gorillas which are grooming each other as a way of building relationships. In many countries, you've now got online dating, but it's still around some of the same purposes. So what this is trying to say is that cognition, although we think of our cognition as completely different, it's still based around essential biological processes. We haven't left this behind. We're still agents which have aspirations and which are adapting. Right? And that's the basic framework. Right? We've got, and now it's no longer agency, meaning agency at its basic level is the ability to move and to do things. Right? It's not just, and so a lion has agency in the sense of it can roar and attack things. But now with the cognitive stuff, we're also talking about our sense of capacity to do this stuff, our beliefs in ourselves, right? And adaptability. It's not just about a limited range of behaviors, and but now we have many more options available to us. Our aspirations. We're still trying to live, but we can also choose. I want to get married in 10 years. As far as I know, my cat can't do that. So we're layering on these more cognitive processes and planning processes onto our underlying the way we work. Is this making sense? Does anybody have any questions, comments at this point? Okay. If not, then this is a recap of what we've been through in module 1. And as we'll see, this is a system, right? This is entirely a system. All of these things we will see, they affect each other. Right? This will be important. And staying with this biological approach, remember that our brains, their basic job description is to keep us alive. But our brains are stuck within our skulls. Right? They don't have direct access to the world. The only way that they have access to the world is through our vision, sound, touch, taste, smell, etc. Right? And it's on that basis that they can make sense of the external world, is through our sensory data. But also, they need to be able to make sense of our internal world so that we can keep breathing. We know when our blood sugar level is too high or whatever, right? Or know when there's been a wound somewhere to send cells to heal. So we're essentially our brains, like the processing center in a sense, and it's not a computer. I hate that analogy. We're living organisms, right? But our brains have to make sense of or process process our responses to things through signals. We don't have direct access to it. It's locked in our skulls. It's astonishing stuff, huh? Our brains. And the way we do this, and this is exteroception. This is exteroception, right? Is about when we the perception we have of the external world and interoception of our internal world, right? The way it does this, it builds models of the world. So we're not acting just in real time. We have models of the world, and this is very much based in a lot of cutting edge neuroscience as to how this all works. And the model of the world, it's not a model of the world itself, but it's a model of the world and my place within it. It's a model of the world itself, but of me, because the purpose is to keep us alive, keep myself alive. So it's a model of my actions, right, and how I'm existing in the world. It's our models of the world, our internal models are the world according to me. And it's more than just, oh, we have mental models. No, no, no. It's much, 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 much deeper than this, as we'll see. It's like it's more like our models have us rather than we have models. Right? Any comments, questions so far? Making sense? Okay, I take that as a I don't know. So the key point is, and our source of these models are both our biological drivers and our experience of interacting with the world. Right? So the key point here is we don't see the world as is. Right? So it's not that, that this lady is really seeing the world objectively. What she's doing is she actually sees or her brain has a model of the world, and that's what we're experiencing. We experience our model of the world, not the world itself, because the world itself is outside of us, right? And our experience is inside of us. Right? So our models are basically within our brains, our nervous systems, also our bodies, but that gets more complex. And essentially, our models of the world are not just about tennis balls and tennis rackets, but they're also about our sense of agency, our sense of options within the world, what we want to achieve within the world, right? The strategies we have, right? And all this is very much modulated by our internal state. So our models are complex. They're not just physical models of the world. They're all about our own narratives, our own ways of being, etc. And our models operate, this is really quite important here. We have like deep level assumptions in our models, right? That things go down rather than go up. Our belief about selfhood, about who we are, and social rules. We have these deep kind of beliefs within our models. Right? And these are pretty stable. And these deep-seated beliefs are actually filtering in what's coming to us from the outside world. So, and so we like to think that we experience the world as it is. But if you look around your room, there's actually billions of things you can see, little little pixels or objects. So we have to always filter stuff out. And what's happening is that our underlying beliefs filter out what we see. And so, for example, if we believe that the world is a nice place and people are nice, we're probably going to see people smiling. Quite literally, we will be taking in this sensory data. If we think everybody is miserable and lazy, that's what we will see, right? I mean, this is rooted in a lot of quite traditional ancient philosophy as well. People have realized this for a long time, but it's like this is also being shown that this is physically how it works. And remember, this was a key thing, that our brains, this is a key idea in modern neuroscience. It's very like a cutting edge thing. is that our brains, our basic operating principle is to minimize the uncertainty between our models of the world and the world itself. And remember, our models include things like gravity, selfhood, goals, behaviors, norms. All right. So all we're doing is we're trying to minimize the uncertainty between our models and the world itself. Another way of saying that we seek to minimize our uncertainty is we seek to maximize our certainty. Right? So we're actually looking to validate our models. Right? We're not like these neutral, objective observers who somehow can see everything as it is while all the other idiots in the world are just being fooled. Right? We are trying to maximize the evidence for our model if left on its own. So in this way, that when you have a prediction, right? So I predict that my if I move my body forward, that my and I'm walking, my foot, I will feel pressure on my foot. So we're constantly making predictions about the world. We're not waiting for the world to come for us to us. Our models are making predictions about what we expect to see and hear in the next sort of like milliseconds or few seconds, and expectations in the next weeks or whatever. Left to ourselves, if our predictions of the world, this is how we believe the world is. If we're receiving data or information from the world which matches our predictions, then our world becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because the model is reinforced. All you're seeing is the model, right? And this has pretty important implications, right? I mean, I'm sure you can all see this, that if we're just reinforcing our model, whether it's about our relationships with our family or about our political views or whatever, right, we can very much do this, and that life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we don't actually have goals in this sense, we have expectations. And what we're doing is we're basically just existing to fulfill our expectations. But in an open world where our predictions about the world conflict with or are challenged by the information and the data we're receiving from the world, we get some errors in what we've predicted about the world and how we're understanding the world. This produces uncertainty between our models and the world. And remember, the purpose is to close that gap. Here, there's no gap to close. Here, there's a gap to close because there's some conflict here. And again, this is just if I'm going fast, this is because we're recapping on the previous on module 1. And there's 2 ways to reduce uncertainty. You can change the model or change the world, because remember, the whole point is the model and the world need to be in some degree of sync. You can change the world by learning, change the model by learning, or change the world by acting. And the trivial example we used is, let's say your model is that there are always apples on my kitchen table. And you walk in one day and there aren't any apples on the kitchen table. What can you do? Right? Your model of the world is not correct. What can you do? Your options. Well, you can learn. Oh, there aren't always apples on my kitchen table. There are sometimes apples on my kitchen table. Right? So you're updating your model to fit the world. Or you can update the world to fit your model. Put some apples on the table. Right? So you're acting, you're changing the world. But so it was only through this prediction error that you had the option to either learn or to act. Or you could ignore the data. you don't notice that there were apples on the table. There weren't any apples on the table because you were looking for your keys. It wasn't relevant. Okay. We're coming to the end of this soon, just 2 or 3 more slides. So the point is, you won't notice the errors, right? And if you don't notice the errors, you won't have there's no space for innovation or changing unless you notice the data. And this basic model, which comes from, it's got roots in biology, in physics, in management theories. It's a basic model in psychology, is you have 2 ways of thinking about the world or trying to solve a problem. You use the knowledge that you already have, right? So you're exploiting the knowledge you already have, the solutions, they somehow exist within your existing frame of reference, or you're exploring the world because the solutions and learning are probably not what you already have. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, right? I'm not saying one is better than the other, but it's just in terms of we're talking about innovation here, right? And it's not always good to innovate, but an innovation generally doesn't exist here. It can do. We can exploit our existing knowledge in some new ways, but generally what we're looking for with innovation is what we don't know yet about the world. In other words, we're looking for new information, right? And this is curiosity, right? We're curious about the world, right? We're literally looking for what we don't know. So we end up creating errors. And remember, it's an extraordinarily noisy world out there. There's a lot going on, from international global politics to what you're going to have for dinner tonight, to have you got a headache at the moment? There's a lot going on, and where we put our attention is critical, because our brains are continuously filtering information. Right? For some of you, there's probably traffic in the background, some noise, but you're not hearing it because you're filtering information, because your brain is always asking, is this information useful? And on what basis is it asking whether it's useful? Well, according to um, according to its existing model of the world. Right? So it can end up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what you pay attention to is critical, right? So we have to be paying attention to uncertainty and what we don't know, right? Going outside of our usual thinking. Otherwise, there's no real scope for change. And that's everything from small little things. Oh, I didn't know that this was the name of my next door neighbor, to understanding why people made understanding why people have different attitudes about climate change. Right? I mean, it's not going to help us just reinforcing our own beliefs if we really want to understand where other people are coming from. Right? In other words, to be able to act with them. So we have to pay attention to what we don't know rather than just carrying on with what we do know. So, but uncertainty, it can be a very difficult thing. All right? Uncertainty, particularly if it's large uncertainty, can create fear, worry. It can be stressful, draining, right? Or it can be so unresourceful, or it can be resourceful, excitement, anticipation, opportunities. And where we see this is going to fundamentally determine the options which are available to us. Right? I mean, we'll see, if you're stressed, then you tend to just retreat into your existing model. If you're relaxed and you see the world as an open and curious space, then you will notice more things. And this is driven by and drives our internal state. And we spent all of last week basically talking about some tools for managing our internal state. All right, so for those of you who were here. And I think our internal state is absolutely key. And we often think it's all about the external state, but it's very much about our internal state. And it's not just, and I emphasize, it's not just about thinking positively. It's much more than that. It's about being in a resourceful state. If you are wondering what the hell this internal state stuff is about, I do encourage you to watch the video, the recording from last week. And so here we're coming back to this framework. And just let me know where we're going, right? Right. So you've got your adaptability, aspirations, and agency, and your internal state. And it's not just that these things affect each other, it's our internal state fundamentally affects our aspirations. So if you're feeling great, positive, you're going to have high aspirations. If you're feeling scared, you're going to have lower aspirations, right? If you're feeling, you know what it's like. You wake up one morning and your hair looks great. You wake up the next morning, your hair probably looks exactly the same, but you think it looks awful. Nothing has changed apart from your internal state. Right? And so what we're going to, this is what we focused on last week as our internal state. And this week, we're going to be looking a little bit more at these three things and how we can actually use them. And I'm going to stop there. And that was a lot. Not for those of you who were there last week, but for others. Any comments, questions, suggestions? Does it make sense? None of it makes sense. Anybody there?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Apologies, I wasn't here for the last two sessions, so thanks
Oh, fine. Yeah.
for that recap. I'm just wondering, I'm sorry I have to leave my camera off as well because of other things. Anyway, busy double tasking. I'm just wondering, I have a PhD student that's looking at mindsets and farmers, and I'm just wondering about practices. I suppose that's in the, is that in, so if you have a certain mindset and then you start to experiment on the farm or whatever, is that where does that fit in the framework? Is it in the uncertainty? I was trying
We
to
will
relate to the apples.
we will get to that a little bit later on. I mean, we've got only a short period of time, but
Yeah,
but very briefly, that this system, it also works with communities. Right?
yeah,
In other words, you also, it's not, although I've used an individual brain,
yeah,
you've also, individual communities have internal states, right? And belief
yeah,
systems and their sense of agency and their sense of the options available to them, the adaptability in their aspirations. So this is actually scalable, right? This
yeah,
model from anything from individuals through to societies, right?
yeah,
Discover. And so, but to answer your question more specifically, yeah, it will be about helping people understand where they're, or either you're trying to understand or helping them understand what their sense of agency is, right? Where
mm,
their aspirations are and what their internal state is, right? Because
mm.
that will then change the options available to them.
Okay, yeah.
But I know that's a very short question answer to a very excellent, a long question. I mean, it's
Yeah, no, it's
got a
fine.
short
I'm
period
trying to
of time.
work it out. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
perfect.
thank you.
Thanks a million.
Any other comments or questions? I'm just trying to understand the exploitive. Is explorative more useful mindset, and which AI is using? Huh. Well, that's an interesting question. Um, There's a lot on exploitative v explorative mindset. It's a big question, and it depends on the circumstances, right? I mean, sometimes you want to use what you know, right? It's not always about exploring new things. And what you know, you have certain expertise, but the problem is that we tend to get quite stuck in our expertise. So we are more often exploiting what we already know rather than exploring new things. And for innovation, it will definitely include some degree of exploring. By definition, it's about what you don't know yet and what you're not doing yet. So it's not that one is better than the other. If you spend your whole time exploring, you'll never act, right? If you spend your whole time exploiting, then you will never find something new. It's all about being able to move from one to the other according to the circumstances. Which AI is using? You mean artificial intelligence here, Ahmad, yeah? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, I suppose which already know in the whole world they using, or is that they are trying to explore into know that unknown to the human kind. I'm not sure which one they use.
Okay, it's a lovely question. I love this question because this is another real one of my, this is a big interest of mine as well. Large language models, AI. I mean, look, they can generate novel answers which they've never answered, which has never been produced before, but they are trained and they're essentially closed systems, right? They're trained and what they can't learn. Once they're trained, they're shut, right? And the reason that they can't learn in this way, in many ways, is because they won't know what information to update. If you learn something, you need to update something, right? And so they're trained, and that's the extent of their knowledge. But there's a very different, and essentially, look, large language models such as ChatGPT, yeah, they are abstract. They don't experience the consequences of their action in the world, right? They're abstract models, and what we're talking about here is all of this is about experiencing, right? Remember, we're saying here that the purpose of we're locating this in life, right? AI doesn't exist in life; it exists on abstracts. So the purpose of AI is not to keep you alive; it's to make understanding of the world according to knowledge. And so, actually, what I'd say is that a big challenge is that large language models they don't experience the consequences of their actions in the world. And this is how humans learn: is we experience the consequences of our actions through interacting with and getting feedback from the world, right? And by definition, large language models can't do that. And there's actually a whole different approach to AI, which is coming, and you will see this, I guess, over the next few years, which is actually based on exactly this stuff, which I'm talking about here, which is about actually trying to make AI a little bit more like human intelligence in terms of it experiences the consequences of its actions rather than an abstract way. Sorry, Ahmed, that was both a long and a far too short answer for a fascinating subject. Anything else? I think that question is really important for us to understand about artificial intelligence. I can't overestimate how critical that this is, because I think we're getting very, very, very worried about artificial intelligence for good reasons, but I think we need to. I think we often don't actually understand what it is in many ways. Any other questions, comments? Does it make sense, this, broadly? Okay, hopefully. All right. We're going to take a break in 10 minutes, but let me just go into this model in a little bit more detail. All right, and then we can So here we are. What I'm trying to say, and the whole purpose of this, very important to me, is that I see so many frameworks about innovation and the way we think. They're so abstract and kind of complex. And this is supposed, and what I'm trying to do here is build something which is not a normative model saying how we should be, but more a description of how things are, right? And to us to understand things, a lens as to how things are, as opposed to a complex framework with loads of different angles, etc., etc. Right? And we're going to get to, after the break, we'll get to how we use it for around ourselves, and then we will get to more the kind of issues that I think Noreen, if I got your name right, Noreen, yeah, raised about how we can use it more with communities, etc., etc. So these are entirely interdependent. So if you have a sense of capacity, which you have a great sense of your own abilities, right? We're not talking about actual abilities, we're talking about sense of, right? There might be a gap. And you have very low aspirations, right? You're going to be pretty bored, right? And if you have very high aspirations and a very low sense of your capacity, you're going to be overwhelmed. You're not going to get very far. And if you have a very high sense of agency and a high sense of aspirations, but you just don't know how to do anything and you're not very flexible, right? You're also not going to get very far. These things, they fundamentally interact. There's not one starting point. And as we will see after the break, when we analyze a problem, you can start anywhere within this system. It doesn't matter where the starting point is, because it's a system. It's not a hierarchical level of this comes first. You know, often we'll see set your aspirations and then everything else will become clear. That's not how life works, right? It's embodied living system of we're continuously trying to make sense of this. But let's have a look at some of these definitions as to what I'm using by these terms. One thing really important, I'm going to show these definitions, and these are examples, right? These are not formal definitions to get too caught up on, right? These because this is all language, and we're constrained by language and our human constructions, right? Life works in a different way. So I'm going to give you examples of the types of things that I'm meaning by this. But don't take these examples as like these are the, you know, the exact definitions and these are the formal definitions. It's more about trying to give you a flavor of some of what's meant by this. Okay. So, and we can talk about them in a bit. So I'm just going to go through them first and then we can talk about them. Agency. So, sense of capacity to make choices. Remember, we're talking about sense of, we're not talking about actual, we're talking about your belief. So your feeling of command over your own thoughts, belief, and choices. Your belief that your choices and actions actually matter, right? And you've got some degree of accountability for your own actions. And again, these are beliefs, sense of. Right? Your sense of your ability to bounce back and to learn, right? In other words, and this is important, your narrative, the sense of who you are, of your past, present, and future. And all of this, you know, some models will say, okay, you should go through each one of these in turn. This is complex. It's this sense of that you are the main actor in your life. Right? Not a selfish thing, but life doesn't just happen to you, but that you are, you know, that like, of course there are external circumstances, but that life is something that you do as well, right? And it might sound obvious, but a lot of people don't have this, huh? Right? Life is something which happens to them. And sense of agency is one of the, I think perhaps this is almost the key thing here. It's so well demonstrated that this is a key source of well-being and action, right, in people's lives if they have a sense of agency. And it's not an objective thing, it's about their sense, right? You know, so even in most extreme circumstances, it might, if you're in extreme circumstances, you're in, I don't know, prison or something, right? Of course you have less objective space to work in, but than if you're out in the world. So, but it's about your sense of how you interact with the space around you. It's not an objective thing here. Aspirations, what we strive to achieve or be, right? Both internal goals and external goals, right? What we're doing and how what we want to see changed in the world, but also about how we want to be. With cognition, it's both, isn't it? It's like we want to do things in the world, but we also have aspirations as to the type of people we want to be, right? And of course, as you can see already, this is very much related to our agency. Right? And then we have our adaptability. In a sense, this is different because this is about our actual behavior out in the world, right? Or how we actually interact with the world. This is, remember, learning that there are either apples on the table, updating our model, or putting apples on the table. This is the adaptability side. Where the rubber hits the road, in a sense. Right? So curiosity and learning, it's not about that we already know, but it's about how can we find out stuff that we don't know to close the gaps. Right? We're no longer just related to simple biological adaptive behavior, such as if we're hot, jumping into a river or whatever. Now we can plan air conditioning systems. Right? Very important here is flexibility here. It's about having, and this is one of the key things with mindset, is it's about having different strategies for different situations, not just one strategy. I'm, a strategic thinker. Great. But are you also a doer? I'm a doer. Yeah, great. But are you also a strategic thinker? It's about being able to access different states according to different situations. And what I'm saying is, and we'll get to this after the break, is that any issue that we can think of, whether it's for us individually or with communities, we'll be able to analyze it and look for it within here. So it can't really ultimately be anything else apart from the who attempting to do what and how. Right? That's where it's about somehow getting these things in order so that they balance each other, but not so much that the system is closed. Right? There's going to have to, otherwise, then, and so we're going to have to create some sense of maybe prediction errors, right? Uncertainty. If we think that we have a low opinion of our abilities, well, maybe we need to create prediction errors about that. In other words, maybe we need to find evidence, we actually need to seek evidence which shows that we are able to do things. Right? Then we've created a prediction error and we have to update our models. And I'm going to show all of these together. And you're not expected to remember this, right? We'll send this. These are all of these things together. One point here is, don't worry about the details, get the sense of it. And I just want to make one other point here, or 2 points here. In some models, you don't want things to overlap, right? This has to be in this category, and that needs to be that category. Here, you will see that things overlap entirely, right? Belief in one's ability to overcome challenges. This is also, that's here as well. All right, about diverse strategies. Okay, I want to sense of ownership. In other words, that it's not that everything is just in one category, because the whole point, the way our brains and our lives and the way life works, is all of this stuff is interdependent. Nature doesn't make the difference between responsibility and internal goals. These are human things that we've put onto it. Right? So don't worry about the details. It's about the direction. The second point is that all of this will be adapted, will be affected by our internal state. If we're feeling resourceful, not just positive, but resourceful, we're going to be more resilient. Right? If we're feeling very, if life is getting us down, and understandably, we're probably not going to have much of an ability to imagine, sense, or articulate new possibilities if we're under threat. All right. And so this stuff will all of these things will affect our internal state, but our internal state will also affect these things. And after the break, we're going to get into how we can actually use this. All right. But just before the break, are there any questions on this? Make sense? No, you're all like,
You can
anybody
use
here?
as well, colleagues, the reactions that you have underneath. So you give us a sense as well. Is everything, clear? Okay.
Right, and I'm not trying to complain, right, about you having your cameras off. I'm really not meaning that. I realize there are good reasons, and I'm not even feeling sorry for myself this, but it's just difficult to understand reactions. And as we're seeing, if I can't see the reactions or don't get any sense, then I don't know whether it's landing, and therefore I can't update it, right? It's not just about being oh, I need to see faces. It's a genuine thing of, so I want to make this useful for you. So that's the thing. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we will get into how we can use this. Okay.
And let's please stay on Zoom, colleagues. Don't leave the meeting. Just, you can keep your camera off and, keep yourself muted, and see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
So for anybody interested, I put in a paper just on this exploitative v explorative dilemma in the chat. There's a PDF, and it's just, for those of you who aren't interested in maths and diagrams, it's fine. It's pretty easy to using this in other circumstances. This model, this is about building stuff together, right? And because there are not many forums, I'm not aware of any, which are trying to bring this really kind of like current understanding of the brain, of underlying processes, into development work, right? So it's not just what I'm saying, but us together here in this thing, we are pioneering here, and we're trying to explore something. Okay. Alexandra, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Ben. And speaking about as well, reflections, feedback. we have prepared a very short survey, which will appear automatically once you close the Zoom session. Please feel free to complete it, because this feedback is very useful for us, for Ben, and will also give us indication, as Ben mentioned, in terms of future workshops and so on. Thank you as well for joining us. Those of you who joined us for all 3 sessions or only for 1 session, it was great having you with us. We hope you found it useful, and you will be able to use some of those learnings and apply them to, or think at least of about the framework when you're trying to apply something to either a, professional or personal context. Yes, so thank you for joining us. Please, yes, Ben, 1 second, please, as well. You can see Ben's email in case you would like to get in touch directly with Ben. But please stay in touch with the FACS community to find out about any, upcoming opportunities, workshops, events, and to join us. Thank you as well for Alejandra for all the support in the coordination and logistics of this workshop. And yes, back to you, Ben.
Thank you, Alexandra. And I just want to emphasize again that, look, I care about this stuff as well. And I'm trying to understand how to land this thing as well. And so please do stay in contact if you have any questions, like Yelman, I'm sorry I pronounced it wrongly. Please do, let's keep in touch and bounce some ideas around on this stuff. And if anybody else has any substantive comments, questions, they want to engage and understand something, do get in contact, because that's how we all can can learn and road test things. So it's not, don't see this as like, okay, now the workshop is finished and that's it, and okay, what do we do now? If you're interested, please come back to me and let's discuss and explore and see how we can take things open. So I'd like to see this as a bit of a beginning rather than as an end, goodbye, nice to have met you type of conversation. Okay.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your afternoon, evening for those of you joining us from Indonesia, or yes, generally afternoon for those joining us from Europe or Africa.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you, Alexandra. And
Thank you,
bye.
Laila.